Live and among the land of the living. Here we are, Joe Rayo and Joe Cioffi on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Both in hoodies again. You have your blue, I have my orange.
This is not really a hoodie. I don't have a hood
Oh,
on this,
well, you have
but
a sweatshirt on
well,
of some
whatever.
sort.
Yeah.
Let's call them sweatshirts. I don't even like to call them hoodies. I call them sweatshirts. So,
Well,
yeah, anyway, go ahead. You were about to say.
I was about to say that. Oh, by the way, I have not at this very moment, but a bit later, I have Briller Jeopardy for moi. Believe it or
Oh,
not,
okay. All right.
if
Well,
I
my
give
my
it to you,
brain doesn't function well with stats like it used to, but I'll definitely give it a whirl.
yeah.
So it's the 25th of February. We are 4 days. Well, we're counting today. We have 3 more days. Uh, no, four more days left this month,
Former.
not counting today. So the
Four.
26th at four, and then March starts on Sunday, which is the month. I guess I never really enjoyed March. It's probably one of my least favorite months, but not for the reasons you might think. So usually by the time we get to March, I'm itching for it to warm up. So you
Right.
get that splattering of warm days. You start to push the thermometers up. 60-degree highs become a little more common, and it's kind of intermixed with shots of cold air that are still coming down. Then, of course, being that we go into the spring months here, where I am on Long Island, it's basically 3 months of doom and gloom. And we'll have to wait till June until we could put together back-to-back days of sunshine. So I just kind of have mixed feelings about it. Then you have a lot of days in March. We get these big storms if they run up to the lakes. You get these, the days where the wind is screaming from all sorts of, all different directions. Like I said, not one of my favorite months.
Yeah, March can be kind of a crazy month. I remember this is in 1987. I had won a contest on what was then WHN radio. Now it's I don't even know what it is. I think it's WEPN, I think, ESPN radio 1050. I won the contest where the prize was to take another person. I took my significant other, my wife, on Amtrak, and we took a train along with a bunch of other people down to Washington, D.C.
Oh,
This is
nice.
80, and this was an Amtrak train. This was not when Washington had a baseball team. They had the Senators, and they had left years ago,
Right.
and before that, the Nationals came in, and so we were going to go on a Sunday afternoon and see an exhibition game between the New York Mets and the Philadelphia Phillies in Washington D.C. And the week before the game, all the cherry blossoms came out in Washington. This was like this is a late March.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the game was going to be on like the 27th, 28th of March. So on the 20th of March, it was like 85 degrees in Washington. All the cherry blossoms were out. It was beautiful. I said to my wife, I said, "Boy, it's going to be wonderful going down there." And on the day of the on the day of the game, when we arrived in Washington, it was 35 degrees. It was like drizzling.
Right.
They couldn't the game we they couldn't give out rain checks because it was an exhibition one shot exhibition game. And as soon as the first pitch was thrown by Sid Fernandez of the Mets, the drizzle changed to flakes,
No kidding.
like snowflakes. It
Yeah.
was like 34 degrees, and we watched that game in the snow. And the week before, it was like 85 in Washington. That is, ladies and gentlemen, what the month of March can be like.
I love DC. I've gone a number of times. I love going through all the Capitol, the White House, which I've been to twice. Uh, and all that stuff is for free, which is even better because you don't spend any extra money outside of your outrageously priced hotel room. Unless, of
Right.
course, you have a friend who get a room on Andrews Air Force Base for you, which is what I did. So there you
Wow.
stay in a nice hotel room for $40 a night. But be that as it may, But if you haven't ever gone to Washington D.C. and you're going to go, it really is one year we went down. We were down there with the cherry blossoms blooming. It is beautiful. I mean, it's just absolutely spectacular. And it was in a cold. It was a cold March that particular year. I don't remember what year it was, but it was a cold March. So the blooms were, you know, they were out there and lasted for days and days and days and days. So I got to, walk the whole area. It's just gorgeous. I love DC. Totally love DC.
Beautiful.
Yep, absolutely. So we should, before we get into weather tonight, welcome to our audience. It's always good to see all the regulars are here and a few new folks here and there. So we'd like to welcome you all. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe to it by hitting the little subscribe button, absolutely free. And also, when you get a chance, go to Joe Rayo's YouTube channel, Joe Rayo Weather, and make sure you subscribe to his so you can get his short fuse updates, which he did one this afternoon but forgot to tell me. And then you come back and you do the live stream. Or did you tell me?
Well, I sent you
You did?
yeah,
Okay,
mess.
my fault. I guess I didn't see it.
Well,
We also want to congratulate. Our former colleague, Jeff Banson, who was nominated for an Emmy today, and that's always a very exciting thing to have happen. So we wish him all the best. I told him, Joe, that if he does win the Emmy, to do two things. First off, is to thank all the little people. Okay. And the second thing is to thank me, because if it wasn't for me, uh, Jeffrey would not have gotten hired at FiOS and then subsequently fired from FiOS so that he would get the job. So that he would get the job at News 12, so that he would get nominated for an Emmy. So, and actually, I could even take that one step back even further, but I won't do that. I will just say that if it wasn't for the fact that I helped him get hired at FiOS and got a nice $500 recruitment check for it as well, if he hadn't gotten hired, he would never have been fired. In which case, he would never be at News 12. So it makes total sense to me.
besides Jeff, a couple of colleagues of mine, former colleagues over at News 12, we have Mike Rizzo, who, by the way,
Yes, I
won
saw that too for Mike. Yes, congratulations to him.
last year. He got the statue last year for best on-camera performance weather anchor category, and also somebody I work with, Dave Curran, who is the meteorologist over at News 12 New Jersey, and I worked with Dave at News 12 Westchester for 6 years. He was the morning guy, I was the evening guy, and so I believe this is Dave's second Emmy nomination. It's always very exciting. It's one thing to win, and it's great to win the statue, but it's very difficult to actually physically get in with a nomination,
Yeah,
and so that's half the job right there. So these three guys who I worked with, and
S-
you worked before, we worked together with
sure.
Jeff. So it's great that are now they are now ticketed to go to the grand ballroom, so to speak,
So
in
who was
April.
nominated? Who were the nominees in the weather category in New York?
Well,
And by
one
the
of
way,
them.
that's when they do it now. When we first started in all of this, uh, it was it was confined to a very very small geographic area, New York City stations, and a couple of nearbys. And now it basically encompasses the entire People's Republic of the state of New York.
And also
Um,
Connecticut too, believe it or
what?
not.
Yes. So who was nominated?
One of the nominees is no longer here. He is down in Florida. Pat Calvin, who was the
Oh, okay,
uh,
that's good. Who
weekend
else?
weathercaster at News 12, Long Island and Westchester, but he left early in January to go down to Florida.
Well, good
I
for
think
him.
Naples, the Naples market. He also got a nomination. Byron Miranda, or
Next.
the Byron on Channel
Yes,
11.
yes. Next.
And
Go on.
and the other, I think there are two others, and I think they were from Univision and Telemundo.
Okay, so
So
there are your winners. So so uh, Joseph Gallo wants to know what the process for nomination is like. You'd be surprised what it's like. It's not what it's not what you think it might be.
You know,
Uh,
I don't really know. You
well,
submit.
I'll tell you what the nomination process is like. So here's
Okay,
how it works, Joe.
all right.
You anybody can enter in whatever category you want. And then you pay a really ridiculous entry fee unless your television station picks up the fee for you. Some stations do and some stations don't. And you'd be surprised what stations don't pay for Emmy submissions, or they might only pay for certain categories. But you have to go through your own work. You pick what you want to send, and you send it, and then it's sent over to another television station outside of this area. So in other words, like New York Emmys might be judged one year by Miami, or they might be judged by Chicago, or who knows where. But it won't be anybody that's anywhere near this area. And usually, what happens is they give a bunch of interns a couple of pizza pies and tell them, okay, go look at these tapes and pick out the ones you like best. They maybe look at about 30 seconds of it, then they pick whoever has the best clothes, and then they just basically count up the points. They have a point system of some kind, and then whoever's got the highest points, whoever comes closest to $1 without going over wins the Emmy.
Well, I actually judged, and this was, I think, for the market. It was either Kansas City or someplace in St. Louis, somewhere in the nation's midsection. And I got to tell you, what made this interesting is that the first thing I looked at was a meteorologist who was in I guess, the mobile weather lab, so to speak. There was a tornado outbreak going on, and so here's this guy, and he's driving along, and as he's driving, they have a view of a tornado that's out the window, and he's describing the tornado, and all of a sudden, the tornado did like a backtracked, and now the tornado is heading for the guys in the SUV, and you hear the meteorologist yelling at the driver, "Bob, we got to get out of here! Bob, go! Hit the gas, Bob!" As this tornado is chasing after. And I said, "Wow, that was really dramatic. That was unbelievable." The very next one I saw was from the same station. It was from the chief meteorologist, and the chief meteorologist was in the studio watching what I had just seen in the previous tape. In other words, the chief
Right.
meteorologist said, "Let's go out to so and so, who's out there right now in the weather lab," and we saw that, and he's showing the whole thing with the guy getting chased by the tornado, and then they throw it back to him, and I said, "So who am I going to vote for here for a possible nomination? The guy who's out there with the tornado being chased by the tornado, or the chief guy who's in the studio safely, tucked away and watching all of this?
Yeah.
Who gets the nomination?" I
Well,
also in the same market, by the way, um, I looked at it at a video of a very attractive young lady, and it was obviously St. Patrick's Day, and the news anchor was wearing green, the sports person was wearing green because of the fact it was St. Patrick's Day,
right.
but the weather anchor was not. And the weather anchor was explaining why she couldn't wear green because she's in front of a chroma wall, a green wall. And then she calls over the news anchor, and now they're standing next to each other, and you see the weather anchor, but you can't see the news anchor because she's all in green, and she disappeared into the background. And they're giggling and laughing. Ah, oh, look at that. Ah. And I'm saying to myself, so I have to make a decision. Who's going to get the nomination? The two gals in front of the weather screen, one of them not visible because she's wearing green, the chief meteorologist who's watching his cohort getting chased by a tornado, or the guy who's in the van getting chased by the tornado. What, Joe, who would you have voted for
I would
who?
have voted for the first one, the guy who was actually out there. Okay.
I must tell you though, and I'm sorry to say this, but I know I have seen cases or have known cases, and you mentioned it for yourself. Sometimes they don't even, the person who's given the job of judging doesn't even do that. He gives it to
Yeah,
Siberian or whatever like that. Here, have a pizza. Watch this and tell me who you think is the best.
well, that's what they do it in the small markets. Or at least they used to. Uh, Joseph Gallo, thanks for hitting super chat tonight. Really appreciate it. Also, another thing, uh, and this is also problematic. So you remember the 1993 Suffolk wildfires that
Right.
right here. And at the time when we were both, I was working at News 12 and Joe was working from time to time, and
1995, the way, Joe.
was 90 what?
95.
Oh, I thought it was 93.
No, it was 95. I definitely remember. I was working for the evening weathercaster then,
Okay, well
and
we won't. Yeah, no, we won't go
and you
down that
came in
road.
the next and you came in the next morning. We kind of like crossed. We were like two ships crossing in the night.
Oh, okay. Well, the thing was with that particular story of the Suffolk County wildfires, it was a big story out here. The and we did a lot of. I mean, the work that we did both on the weather side. I mean, I'm speaking for myself. I did really good work while I was out there. So on the weather side,
Absolutely.
and on the news side. Um, Everybody did great work. I mean, the videos were, the photography up and down, wonderful. So they entered, all these, different press awards, and we won a gold. We won an ACE award for it, which at the time was because cable was not allowed to directly compete. The Emmys were not allowing cable operations to compete directly, so they had the cable ACE awards, and we won a cable ACE, and we were nominated. I remember for a golden ACE, which was like the top thing, and then there were a few others. Not a single, not a not a single Suffolk wildfire story got nominated for an Emmy in the New York Emmys group, and the the reason why was because that year Los Angeles was judging the New York entries. So Los Angeles is looking, folks in California, when they have wildfires there, they just literally, they burn half the state
Right.
burns.
Right.
Okay. So when they saw what we had with the Suffolk wildfires, which was, basically contained in however many square miles in Suffolk County, to them that probably looked like somebody standing over a garbage can, burning wood in order to create heat. So we didn't get a single Emmy nomination out of that. I think that was one of the last times I actually, I actually entered the Emmys in the weathercaster category because that just really annoyed me. The fact that you put an entry in and just by chance it goes to a market that at that time was probably one of the least savviest weather markets around. So and they're judging your stuff and weather in those days weather didn't really matter to folks in California
Right.
in terms of how it was marketed on the air. So yeah, so I just got to the point where it's like uh, I'm not doing this. So I think what we should have to, we you and I talked about this. So next year we have to find out what category the Joe and Joe Weather Show needs to go, and we need to send them this show. Because if we don't win an Emmy, we'll send a message.
Something like
Something like that.
yeah, yeah.
We should
Why
do
don't
that.
we
We'll
do?
do that.
We're kind of like the weather equivalent. One of the brothers passed away a few years ago, but that show that was on NPR for many years, the car show, I think they called it the Click and Clack, the Tappert Brothers or
Yes.
whatever. Very, very popular on NPR. Everybody listened to it. Everybody enjoyed it or whatever. You and I are kind of like the equivalent of the car show, except we're the weather show now and bouncing stuff off, and not necessarily about weather. We do other subjects as well. During times like right now when there's nothing really to talk about in terms of in terms of weather. This
Yeah.
winter is a dead winter.
Which is what we probably should be doing now. We're 20 minutes into the show and we haven't even said a thing about what's going on. However, I would suggest the following. Um, I mean, I wish I could do it, but I can't do it because I just can't, not right now. But this might be a good opportunity for a road trip for those of you who feel up to it and head up to upstate New York, southwestern New York, and also along the lee side of the lakes, because I think there's going to be some decent lake effect action going on from this system once it's all said and done. The one for Wednesday night and Thursday in southwestern New York, northwestern PA, and then also on the east shores of Lake Ontario, up around Tug Hill and Watertown, Pulaski, north of Syracuse. I think this could be a pretty uh, interesting snow event up there from the standpoint of lake effect. And I got the digital snow map up from the Weather Service right now, and also some big amounts up in northern Vermont and northeastern New York, up the Northway, parts of northeastern Vermont, and into New Hampshire and Maine. Some fairly sizable snows, looking like 6 inches or more in some places. And in the lake effect areas, I'm probably going to see some 1 foot plus amounts before it's all said and done. I'm going to pull up the Buffalo map to see what they're doing here. Go ahead. You commentary.
All right. Well, the commentary here is yes, you can see on your screens right now the potential for significant snowfall. Again, as Joe mentioned, you have to take from the tri-state area or southern New England, you'd have to take a bit of a road trip up north. But if you really want to see snow, there you go. It looks like the lake effect snow machine will be in action.
Yeah, I got the New York State map up. This was updated by Buffalo, the Buffalo Weather Service office, about an hour or so ago. I don't know if you got it on your screen yet.
Yeah, I just saw it, but also there'll also be a fair amount of wind. I don't think it's going to be enough though, Joe, for any kind of wind advisory. At least it doesn't look to me like that'll be the case right now in the immediate area. Although come Thursday morning, that frontal line that comes on through is going to be accompanied by a dramatic shift in the winds and also a dramatic increase in the winds, and so. And what is your idea? What are your thoughts on Thursday, Joe, in terms of overall in terms of sky condition? I've seen, some say it's going to turn bright and sunny. I'm not too sure about that on Thursday. I think
Yeah, it's a
it
tough call. You know why? Because the upper trough is very strong, and you've got two arms. There's one short wave that's going to come through. There's another one that's going to come through on Friday. So my thinking is that there probably will be, there might be some initial clearing once the surface front moves through early Thursday morning, and then I think we'll probably cloud over to a certain extent during the day on Thursday as that colder, unstable layer of loft starts to swing around. You get that first short wave. And I think the lake effect activity is going to be busy enough that there's a chance that we might see. This is really bad when you're really grasping at the idea of just getting a snow shower, okay, as something exciting, but uh, that's the way it's been this winter, and I think there's a chance that we maybe might see a few scattered showers make it over the Catskills and over the Poconos, and maybe somebody sees a snowflake and jumps up and down and takes a picture of a snowflake on a piece of pavement or something.
something like that.
Yeah, I mean
Something like
other than that, it's just going to be a shot of cold air that comes in for the weekend that's going to be essentially wasted because it goes right out when we move into early next week.
Did you see by the way, the 700 millibar F-Gen map for Thursday morning, say around 11 or 12 Z, especially on the 3 kilometer and 12 kilometer NAM
Well, hang on.
map?
We'll bring it up. Hang on. So you want the 3 kilometer NAM?
Yeah, that is well. That's good because you can go hour by hour. Whereas, let's say the GFS, you can only go every six
So what do
hours.
you want the 850 or the 700?
I like the 700.
Okay. So hang on. So I
It looked like
got
somebody slammed spaghetti all over the.
so let me just run it through. So I don't think very much. We've got these little patchy areas of rain that are moving through on the radar tonight. They're not really amounting to much, and I don't think there's going to be too much that happens during the day tomorrow. But yeah, you can see here that all that omega, as you call it, because that's what it is. But we've got that all swinging across eastern Pennsylvania, and yeah, by 5 in the morning, Joe, that's some pretty serious stuff there. I think there could be a thunderstorm out of this. SPC actually had um, uh, a marginal risk of severe weather into Virginia, but they actually had general thunderstorms up to north of New York City with this.
Right.
So I think there could probably be the chance that we could see a little bit of hear some thunder and see some lightning, albeit at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Right. And again, a very dramatic shift in the winds. Look at how those winds right ahead of that line are roaring out of a southerly direction,
Yes.
and then behind the line shifting into the west. So it's almost like a 90-degree shift.
Yeah, there's
Uh,
like 60, 70 knot winds out at 700 millibars here as this arm goes by.
right.
And then, of course, you sort of see these scattered areas of Omega during the day on Thursday in upstate New York, and uh, a little bit going into early Friday morning. That's as far out as we go in the Hudson Valley because you got this second trough that's going to be swinging around. So you know what? I think it was worth putting in with regards to uh, uh, the chance that there might be a snow shower running around. Maybe Thursday's kind of tricky with the temperatures, but perhaps even on Friday something might sneak in. Let me let's just go back. I'm just going to set the NAM up, and we'll come back to the NAM in a moment. I want to go back to the National Weather Service's U.S. full page where we could see the watches and warnings tonight. We do have winter weather advisories up for a few counties in eastern Colorado, southeastern Wyoming, western Nebraska, and part of the state of Kansas, the western part and a little bit of the middle. Then you've got a break and then a second round of advisories in east central Missouri, northeastward through Illinois to Chicago, and then northeast from there through southern Michigan, Indiana, and northwest Ohio. Now, this was an area where a lot of this was under a winter storm watch, but the models have sort of backed off a little bit in terms of how far north the snow is going to be and in terms of the amounts. So the weather services have adjusted their snowfall forecast accordingly. And we have winter storm watches up northeastern, extreme northeastern Ohio, northwestern PA, southwestern New York, north central and northeastern New York, and then um, the all of Vermont except the northwestern counties, northern New Hampshire, and most of Maine except the counties that line up along and just inland of the coast, which is pretty much where it's been all winter long, Mr. Rayo.
And where the zone in southern New Mexico, extreme western Texas, and South Texas, the red area,
Yeah, the red flag warning.
that's red flag warning.
The
Okay.
purple, what looks like, yeah, it's supposed to be red, but it's actually, in my eyes, it looks like a more purple than anything else.
Or
Uh,
puce.
okay, so you had to, all right, puce. That's got to be the worst word, worst named color. Puce.
Puce.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, it sounds. I don't know.
Or fuchsia. Can we use that term?
Fuchsia. You want to go fuchsia? We go fuchsia.
Whatever.
Okay, whatever works. Okay, so there are your watches and warnings that we have up. The this was the SPC map. I had it up. Hang on, I'm going to try to get the GOES map up. Uh, oh boy, here we go. So on the satellite tonight, of course, you've got all this moisture streaming from the Gulf of Mexico northeastward. You have the energy that's still hanging back in the Middle Mississippi Valley and back over into Kansas and Nebraska. So that's the system that is going to eventually develop into a rather interesting low that's going to run up across from southern Indiana and Ohio, and then eventually kind of turn its way up into western Pennsylvania and head up into upstate New York. Sort of a little bit of an unusual setup here, Joe. If we had any kind of a negative NAO at working here, or if the East Pacific Oscillation were even a little bit negative, this probably would have been a snow event for us. for at least I think the northern part of the I-95 corridor anyway. But there's no cold air. It's all the cold air is pinned up, north and west of New York State on the Canadian side and over the Great Lakes, and it's going to just sort of pivot around and then eventually drop into Western New York and Western PA, while the rest of the East, the low takes a track up just inland, so you can't really do too much with that. And by the way, with respect to snowfall in the last 72 hours, there's actually been a fair amount of snowfall in the Dakotas and western Nebraska, also through parts of Wyoming and Montana. Some areas getting as much as 8 to 12 in some spots. So it was pretty busy there. And down in Colorado, our friend Ruthless Goat, the snow last night was more west of Denver, west of Route 20 of Interstate 25, and going north from there. So I think I don't think he got much out of that. So I'm going to jump to just real quick, Joe, the radar. I'll update it here. You've got this east-west band of rain with this first low that's redeveloping off the Jersey coast and is going out. You've got some rain showers so maybe a couple of thunderstorms down in northern Florida, and a little bit of precip action, some snow back into parts of Kansas, and the rest of the country looks pretty quiet.
Well, you said just now about the upcoming situation that if things were just a little bit different, that this might have been a snowmaker for at least parts of the Northeast. And it's interesting to point out that last week, I think it was last Thursday and Friday, the Euro was indeed suggesting that this could be a significant snowmaker. In fact, at least one of the forecasters, one of the local TV weather forecasters in the New York area was alluding to that or saying that, hey, maybe next Thursday, Thursday being this coming Thursday, we
Right.
could have significant snow, basing it on what the European was saying. And I said to myself, my goodness, the Euro has been doing this all winter long, promoting a potential big storm, more than 5 days in advance. But once we actually get to the actual
Yeah,
event,
it doesn't happen.
it doesn't happen. It's nowhere to be found. So,
Well,
yeah,
I just drew in where the cold air is and how it's coming down out of Canada, out of eastern Canada, but it's it's getting funneled west southwestward across Michigan and northern Illinois, northern Indiana into Missouri and Kansas. It's got this really long northeast fetch up there that is taking all the cold air west and south. The surface low that is analyzed on the Nam Lake this afternoon in northwestern Virginia, I mean, that goes out underneath us. If this, if you had more help from Canada, where you could have pushed this high further southeast and maybe wedged in a little bit more of that colder air down into New England, it would
right.
have been a different story. But the upper air was all wrong for it, just like it has been.
We really haven't been able to play the perennial uh, meteorological game of splits and blocks this year because there hasn't been much in terms of any blocks, and we really haven't seen all that much in terms of splits.
Right, exactly. Now here's your low for a Wednesday that starts to form in western. Well, it kind of jumps all over the place. There's a low center that ultimately by Wednesday afternoon is sitting in western North Carolina. Actually, you just kind of have this sort of long front that this low is riding up on, and the warm frontal boundary, if you want to believe it, Joe, is by the way, I know I'm drawing it in blue, the warm front rather than in red, but I'm just too it's too much trouble to change the colors. You get the idea. So
Yeah, well,
your warm air is coming up the coast. You're getting a little that ocean flow is going to be here tomorrow for a little while, so that's going to keep things a bit on the raw side. But eventually, what happens is that low deepens. You see it here going into northern Pennsylvania. There's a low near Williamsport by about 1 in the morning, and then there's a line of heavy downpours and near your thunderstorms. I think as you look at the I got the 12-kilometer NAM up, right? No, I got the 3 up. Well, it's just as well. It's the same thing. I mean, it has the same idea. But
right.
there's your showers and storms here between say 1 a.m. in around midnight in south central PA, about 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Southeast PA into northern New Jersey, about 4 a.m. Going north of New York City, and then lifting up north and east of there. But that's that, the low deepens, and you got this pretty strong cold front that's just kind of swinging on through.
Absolutely. It's almost like taking a crowbar and prying. Well, normally I would say taking a crowbar and prying out the cold air, but in this case, this particular scenario, it's kind of pushing out or prying out the mild air and replacing it with that big sweep of much chillier air behind it.
Right. And here, by the way, here's your snow across, just makes it to about Chicago. Detroit gets in a big way. So does most of Indiana and Northwest Ohio. And then, of course, your low's going to run up to the north. And now we start to open the spigots up for some, snow that's on the west side. Plus, you're going to get this lake effect. The winds coming in off of Lake Erie. And then eventually, as that low gets further north, Thursday morning and starts to move up into northern New York, now you're going to start opening up the lake effect nonsense off of Lake Ontario.
Right,
So,
and with the lakes wide open with no ice, it's a
oh yeah, I mean,
yeah.
you wonder whether this could wind up overperforming with the lake effect here. And some of that snow, by the way, could probably find its way down western PA and into West Virginia, Western Virginia, and even into western North Carolina. We could see some snow showers extending pretty far south. And then as we let me just switch to the GFS. I'm going to go to the full U.S. view here. So give me 1 second.
And one thing about Western Pennsylvania and even especially West Virginia, people don't often think of West Virginia as snow territory, but in a situation like this with the northwesterly winds, you get that upslope along the mountains
Yes.
that cross through West Virginia, what we call this orographic lifting. That lifting effect can produce quite a bit of cloud cover and quite a bit of precipitation, and in this case, there could be quite a bit of snow. You're a skier, yeah, you probably know already that West Virginia is a nice place to head for if you want to do some skiing.
You wonder, Joe. I'm looking at the GFS lake this afternoon has a 979 low over Lake Ontario. That gradient is fairly tight over us down through Pennsylvania and down into Virginia. You wonder whether there might be, like you said earlier, maybe some wind advisories. They already have a high wind watch up for a few counties in western Massachusetts. It's
You
like
know,
this.
this looks like the same scenario that we went through on a couple of Fridays ago, where we had the 971 low. That 971 was passing through like Poughkeepsie. This particular situation is just a bit different in that the low is more displaced about 150 miles further to the north and west as opposed to what we had a couple of weeks ago. But same kind of situation,
Yeah.
same story as we had 2 weeks ago. This is in a nutshell, this has been our winter. This is what we have been seeing. We haven't been seeing the coastal systems that might ordinarily bring us, a significant snowfall across the Northeast. We've been seeing these powerful, potent, compact lows that have been passing off to our north and west and brushing us with, showery rains, some snow activity behind it, gusty winds, a shot of cold weather, and then after a few days, it all goes away, and we're back to the same scenario, moderation in temperature, and get ready for the next round of rain.
By the way, as this low pulls out, the weather to the west calms down considerably. It's fairly quiet. Actually, except for the lake effect on Friday, there's very little going on. You might notice there's this little patch of snow that you see in southern Illinois and moves into Kentucky. That's actually the second upper trough that's swinging around and produces some light snow on Friday in West Virginia, Kentucky, Western Virginia, and Western North Carolina. And then gradually it just disappears. You get a little low that forms out well east of the Virginia coast and then runs out over the open ocean of the Atlantic in that fire hose. So we'll just wind up going straight across. And then, of course, the weekend, Joe, I think uh, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but particularly probably Saturday and Sunday, maybe Sunday as well, it looks like a pretty cold weekend here. We may not see temperatures, certainly not going to see temperatures out of the 30s, and in many areas they may really struggle in the on Sunday until the high goes out. And then, of course, after that, there's got a rush of precip with what looks like a warm front coming in on Monday night, Tuesday, with some snow to the north and rain to the south that doesn't amount to too much. Also, action coming into the west. And later next week, looks like another low is going to run up toward the Great Lakes. Another cold front moves through here. We get another shot of cold air. Now we're into the first weekend of March. Then we move our clocks ahead an hour. And you know what? It's the same old nonsense. The GFS has also been doing some silly things in the long range period off the Mid Atlantic coast, which we don't care about. I was looking at the upper air. There wasn't really a whole lot to write home about it. Once again, there's nothing in the long range that really excites me.
Yeah. Yep. Same story, Joe. First 10 days of March, I think we can pretty much write off if you are a winter weather enthusiast. Still have this gut feeling, I don't know why, that we may see something surprising maybe at the end of March or even the beginning of April. Um, maybe this might go down in the books as the bookended winter, in that we had a big storm, the one that dumped all that snow in Albany at the beginning of December, and maybe we'll finish it with some kind of a significant winter event, uh, the beginning of April or sometime around there. And people will say, "Why can't we get this during the regular January, February period?" You
This
know,
this pattern has to break eventually. It cannot go on forever. It is going to break. I think for your scenario to be correct, we have some time, but I certainly would like to start to see signs of that happening when we get to, say, around March 9th or 10th. We
right?
actually get to March 9th or 10th, and we're starting to look out in the longer time frame. At that point, the models need to pick up on the idea that this pattern of the locked up polar vortex locked up in the Arctic uh, starts to break down. I can't imagine that it's not. I mean, it has to break down. That's not what I'm getting at. I can't imagine that it would just kind of hold up there in a locked position and just instead of necessarily breaking down, it just sort of weakens and goes away. But it still remains that kind of tight little ball, keeping all the whatever cold air is left, just keeping it up there and not sending it southward.
We'll see. Do you want your question or
Yes, let's do it. Briller Jeopardy,
really?
go.
This is for this was Scott Briller said, since you were for a while in the New Orleans weather market, TV
Yes.
market.
Mm-hmm.
He is asking here our question tonight, and he says if you get this, you also get a daily double.
Oh,
uh,
okay.
uh, what is the coldest temperature ever recorded in New Orleans, and what year did that take place? Do you
Okay,
do you
so when I was there in when I first got there in late '83, early '84. Well, I got there in November of '83. And as soon as I got there, the main weather guy, Bob Breck, who if you're in New Orleans, you know Bob Breck. He was an absolute legend, and he's retired now. And we always wish him well. I talk to him every once in a while. Great guy, uh, and always treated me, very well. And he hadn't got on hadn't they hadn't hired that spot. So when I went to work there, he immediately went on vacation. So as soon as he left, we had record citywide floods. Okay, and then this was over Christmas time, and then that was followed by a one of the coldest shots of air to come down uh, ever in New Orleans. So I think when I was there, it got down to seven above, six or seven above, or eight above. I don't know if that was a record. And then it happened again in '84. So I'm gonna say,
okay?
wait a minute, hang on. I'm just trying to figure this out because we had. So I'm gonna say, so January, end of January of '84. 5, 7 ish, 6 or 7 ish.
Well, he didn't give me the month or even the exact date, but he did tell me that the coldest temperature in New Orleans was 6 degrees above zero, and that was set back in 1899.
Okay, so then this was like it got down to like 7 or 8. So
Right.
I was close. I was going to
Yes.
say either 6 or 7. I decided to go with 7. I guess I should have said 6. But let me tell you, I was down there, and I had already lived on the Gulf Coast for for 3 years.
Corpus
So,
Christi.
well, 2 years in Corpus Christi, and then my first of 3 years in New Orleans. So my body was completely acclimated to Gulf Coast living, which is, needless to say, very warm most of the time. Um,
Right.
but in the winter months, it does get chilly, and your body's not used to it when it gets below 50. So when it got below 32 in New Orleans, oh my! And I have to tell you, Joe, one of the big problems that happens in there is, it's New Orleans is below sea level, and most of that whole area there is barely, it's either below sea level or at sea level. I actually had a place that I owned and still do is on a mountain in New Orleans. It's 10 feet above sea level.
Wow.
Okay, so they don't have oil heat. Everything is electric and forced hot air. So when you would think up here in the summers when you put straight on the electrical system, down down there it was in the winter time that the electrical system gets really strained because everybody's got their heaters on with forced hot air, and they would be
Right.
getting blackouts and brownouts because of that. And so it's the exact opposite. Plus, you need the electricity to pump up the drinking water because of the water table there and how everything works and the whole plumbing systems required actually electricity to help you bring your water up especially if you were in a 2 or 3 story apartment building. So yeah, it was totally. It's a wonderful city if you've never been to, and if you do go there, go with an appetite because the food is insane.
And I told you this story. I'll tell it to everybody else now. Uh, I worked for a private weather forecasting service for a good number of years, and there was a chance that we were going to pick up one of the big radio stations in New Orleans. And we're talking to the program director, and we
Do you
said,
remember which one it was?
well, I know eventually we ended up getting WTIX in New Orleans,
Okay,
but this was a station that was either the equivalent or even bigger than that. And we were telling the program director, "Oh, we know New Orleans weather. There's no problem. We can do your weather forecast." And so he said, "All right, why don't you send me a few examples of your sound, the way that you would, uh, if something significant were to come up here, let me just listen to some of your voices." And we sent a tape down to him with myself and another person, and we had a young lady who had an exquisite sound. I don't know how many of you remember here in the New York City market, there was a young lady who was on WLTW for many years, Valerie Smaldone. And she had like the perfect voice, the perfect feminine voice for, announcing music and recording. And we had a gal who sounded just like that. We sent all this stuff down, and we about a day later, he calls us back and said, "I thought you said you knew what the weather. I thought you said you knew New Orleans weather or Louisiana weather." And I said, "Of course we do." He said, "Well, I want to play you something from that gal that did the weather for us." And as soon as he played it and I'm listening, I immediately knew what he was PO'd about. She did a fake severe thunderstorm warning, but she said, "And the warning includes the following counties."
Okay, yes,
Ouch!
yeah, no,
Ouch!
no, 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 no,
There's no such thing as
parishes,
counties.
parishes, yeah, yeah, that's a big mistake.
Yeah,
Yeah, because yeah, in Louisiana they are not known as counties, they are known as
and there's
parishes.
parishes.
Um,
And so much for that. So much for getting that station.
yeah, I could understand that.
The
Yeah,
gal's name, the
yes.
gal's name was Tori. I remember, Tori, would you come in here for a second? Sat her down. Um, there's
Yeah,
something
but
you
you
can
know
tell about
something.
Louisiana.
But still, the the warning comes out. If you're getting the warning comes out and it says parishes. It doesn't say
Right.
counties.
It didn't, but I mean, it was not something that came off the teletype. She just automatically said, "Okay, I'll write up a script for, um, for a severe thunderstorm," assuming that it was the same thing as, let's say, up here, and not knowing that, instead of counties, she should have said parishes. Well,
Right, right.
such
No,
such life,
it's an
such
honest mistake. I mean, if you're not from there,
right,
it's the only state that the counties are called parishes.
right. And the
Um,
problem was, it said, "Oh yeah, we know New Orleans, we know Louisiana, but we've done Louisiana weather,
yes.
even though it was a lie. We had not done the
Well,
weather specifically for Louisiana, but we had done a number of other places in the Southland
hmm
along the Gulf Coast. It was just that, as you just pointed out, the only state in the entire union that calls it parishes and not counties was Louisiana. So what are you going
yeah,
to do?
it's one of the few places, if not one of the only places where you could actually use the phrase "suck heads" on air and not get in trouble for it, because
Right.
that was a reference to eating crawfish,
Tomorrow I'll
which you
tell you
could
the
basically pull out of any sewer down there. You
right.
know?
Tomorrow I'll tell you the story about how when we were in New Orleans and my wife was doing the morning weather down there, Ron Swoboda, New York Met legend
I
Ron
worked with
Swoboda,
Ron Swoboda.
yeah,
I
and
did.
and and so she comes out. She says, "What can I?" Because they put them together.
hmm
The morning guy introduced Ron Swoboda to my wife on the radio on the air, and so my wife says, "What can I talk to him about? Bring up something that I can, the great catch that he made in the World Series." I said, "No, bring up the fact that he had a Chinese step grandfather."
Uh,
And she said, "What? You're crazy." And like when she brought that up on the air to him, he was so shocked that she knew that. And the morning guy there was shocked, like, "What are you talking about, Renata? What are you doing?" And it was true. He actually had his grandmother, after his grandfather died, his grandmother married somebody from China. And so he had a Chinese step grandfather, and it was one of those little things that doesn't come up every day.
no,
And so, and Ron Sabota had to explain it to everybody on radio about
and for me, the thrill was the fact that I remember seeing Ron Swoboda doing sports in New York on
right,
TV, and then he didn't do sports anymore. I don't know what happened, but just one day he wasn't there. And then I come to find out that I'm going to station in New Orleans to go work there, and Ron Swoboda is the main sports anchor. And
right.
I didn't work with him very long because he actually left the station shortly after that. Um, but it was such a thrill for me knowing Ron Swoboda's history and the Mets and growing up in New York, and now I'm on the set with the guy. Uh,
I
that
briefly
was just awesome.
I briefly interned over in the mid 70s, 1975, 76, over at CBS 2, the 524 broadcast building, and spent a lot of time with Joe Whitty, who was the uh, evening meteorologist at Channel 2. Some of you may remember Joe. And one day
Uh-huh.
we're walking together in the hallway, and who's coming from the other direction? And this is when he was doing the sports at Channel 2, Ron Swoboda, my idol. I was
Yes.
at the game. I was at my first World Series game was game 4 in 1969, where he made that incredible catch. And so we're passing him. He said, "Oh, how you doing, Ron? I want to introduce you. This is my friend Joe Rayo." And I'm looking at, he was a big guy, Joe.
Yes, he was.
Very imposing guy.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and the next time I came down there, I brought the ticket stub with me from the World Series, and I went to Joe and I said, "You think I can get Ron to sign it?" He said, "Sure, no problem." He walks me over to Ron Swoboda's desk, and I said, "Mr. Swoboda, it would be my great honor if you would inscribe this." And he looked at it, and as soon as he saw the ticket, and he saw the number 4 on the World Series ticket, he knew what that was. By the way, he was also number 4 on the Mets. And he said, "Oh well," and he took out his pen and he signed the back of it. He said, "I had it all the way, Ron Swoboda." And that ticket stub is in a shadow box of all my memorabilia there
Oh,
in the other
nice.
room there. Great guy. And I can't believe he's in his 70s now. I
Yeah,
can't believe I'm in my 60s now. Well, you're in your 60s now, Joe.
I
Isn't that,
am.
So
I am.
where's time going here?
Well, I mean, we're 55 minutes into this show, so it's moving fast. Scott
Thank you,
Briller,
Scott
thanks
Miller.
thank you for hitting super chat tonight. Yes, we entertain everything from weather to the Flintstones.
Right.
That's
And don't
correct.
forget, I mentioned this last night, Friday night. I'm not sure if it's at 6 or 6:30. One of those two Flintstone episodes on MeTV, the Stony Curtis episode.
Yes.
You can't miss that.
Now,
I think
speaking of,
that was in the sixth and final year of the Flintstones when they were on the network on ABC. They had a number of guests who made appearances. They even had what, Samantha
right, they
and
had Elizabeth Montgomery. I think it was
and
Elizabeth
Dick Short.
Montgomery. Yes,
And,
playing
and Dick Short,
the Bewitched characters.
right, and
Uh,
Tony Curtis
Tony Curtis and Stony Curtis and Margrock
and Mark Rock.
and Margrock and well, we know about Perry Masonry, but
Perry Mason.
he appeared as as the lawyer in the adoption episode, in
They
the
just
Bam
had one
Bam
on
episode.
they just had one on Sunday where the Flintstones go to the Bedrock version of the World's Fair. They go
Yes.
to a time machine and they go back. They go forward in time. They end up in Rome, and the guy who's playing his violin and I guess Nero, whatever, is Jack Benny.
Yeah.
It was Jack Benny.
That's
Then
too funny.
Wilma says to Jack Benny, says, "Sir, would you please stop playing your violin?" And Jack Benny goes, "Well," continues playing the violin.
Well,
Oh, that was a
I
great.
have, just speaking of MeTV, I have two Perry Mason episodes taped. Last night's 11:30 p.m. episode on DVD, and then the morning episode, which I didn't get a chance to look at. So that is what I'm going to do now as the show's over. But I also found out, I didn't realize there's another cable channel, and I don't know where it is on Optimum. It's called Fine Entertainment FETV, Fine Entertainment Television. It's another channel, and it's like MeTV. And if you look at their schedule, it's very similar to MeTV's. But they have Perry Mason on. I think they have 2 hours of Perry Mason on between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. So I can actually binge watch the darn show all day long if I
Correct.
wanted to. But I'm not going to do that. I have to. I'm missing the 8 o'clock one now. I'm going to replay my tapes to see what I missed from overnight and this morning. I mean, replay my tapes, play the DVD, shows you where my head is at.
Yeah. Well, I guess we could shut this down now. We've gone a full hour almost.
Uh,
We're
yes, we
talking about.
have. Yes, we have. It's you know, the lack of weather for us.
Sends us on all different directions and other subjects and topics here.
Yeah, so which is fine. So anyway, uh, let's call it a night. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. To the super chat folks who hit tonight. Joseph Gallo and Scott Briller. Thank you so much as always. Very generous of both of you. And I don't think I have anything else to self promote. So we can just leave it at that. So good night, everybody.
Or reservoir.